being able to staunchly advocate for whatever. One of those recently was talking about nature strips. Yeah, I was just thinking, like, what is even the point of some of these? Like, so that's why I protested. I put the budgie smugglers on. I was like, what are you going to do? Have people made these so that you can sit in sunbake on it? You know, they were like, how stupid is this? Someone's like laying on the middle of the road in their budgie smugglers. I'm like, it is stupid. Like, why is that grass there? Why is that not, you know, native flowers and stuff? Our taxpayer dollars are going into funding things which are bad for the environment, harming nature, whilst our whole total part of the budget that's responsible for caring for nature is like barely $1 billion, 25 times less. We're voting for these things. We're putting the people in power that can change these things. You can just see how some of these systems just need to be flipped on their heads.
Hello and welcome to What Can We Do, a podcast where I bring you conversations with the people who are working hard to make a difference in the world. We talk about the biggest issues we face today, what we can do to build something better, and how each of us can be part of that change. My name is Mitch Pope, and today you'll hear my conversation with Clancy Lester, also known as the Bee-Man. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording from today. I'd like to acknowledge all First Nations people and pay my respects to elders past and present. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Clancy is an environmental creator, an educator, native bee, insect and plant nerd who is passionate about the climate and environment, indigenous knowledge, science communication, and making the case for ripping up the nature strips we currently have in our streets and turning them into real nature strips full of native flowers, plants, and biodiversity. You might have seen Clancy on social media before, talking about bees, about how autumn doesn't exist in Australia, or the videos of him sunbaking on a nature strip in the middle of the road wearing his budgie smugglers. Pretty classic. We spoke about the need for positive male role models in the time of the manosphere, the nature and climate crisis, the capture of our politicians by their corporate donors, and why we should all be excited to get our hands dirty and help build a better world. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Clancy, thanks so much for chatting with me again. I have to mention that we did talk a few months ago, back in, would have been December or November last year, when I was trying to get the podcast going, and then we just got busy and it never ended up happening. So I really, really appreciate you giving me your time again, so we can, I guess, have a similar conversation, but talk about things that are a little bit more relevant. How are you going at the moment?
Yeah, awesome. I think it works out all right that we're running it back, because times are changing so fast and we're both just up to doing so much. And I'm more than happy to come back on and have an awesome chat with yourself. So thanks for having me on, Mitch.
No, I really appreciate it. Do you want to speak a bit about your, as you said, like you're very active in the environmental advocacy and conservation and education space at the moment, and you have been for a fair while. Do you want to speak a bit about the work that you're doing at the moment and the work that you've done in the past, and what sort of led to you, I guess, gaining a bit of traction on your social media and in the world of environmentalism? Yeah, so
if we go right back to the start, I grew up like obsessed with nature. I was lucky to grow up in country Victoria in a rural area where there's lots of outdoors and bushland. So I was always going and catching lizards and making cubbies and spending my time up the river, and just like really love that. Love watching nature documentaries. Like, shout out to David Attenborough. I think he's nearly 100 years old. Like, he's a absolute legend. And just being able to connect with nature has been something that's really positively impacted my life, and one thing I've wanted to continually doing throughout. And then time and time again, as like I went through high school, through university, I was, looking at different things, like science, maths, arts, like learning all about different things. But I just would always get brought back to nature and the environment, and, how much I care about it. And then when I got the chance to like live on country and live with Yolngu First Nation up in Arnhem Land and really connect on a whole nother level to my local environment, it was just super, super special. And I wanted to just share how awesome nature is and the environment is. Like what David Attenborough said around how for us to care about nature, we need to know that it exists and how awesome it is. And then once we do care about it, that's when we're going to act on it and to try and look after it. And that's one thing. When I had this awesome experience, I just have this passion for nature, and then going to the pub or, speaking to people at uni and then talking about insects, talking about nature, plants, indigenous knowledge. And I feel like we're pretty disconnected at times. And that was one thing where I was like, there is so much of this awesome stuff and not many people even know that much about it. So then that's what really spurred me on my journey to want to, get involved in environmental education and make social media content and just spread the word of nature and how awesome it is and how we should just be super connected to it.
And it's been clearly really well received. And I think you've done a really good job. You've obviously came from the country. And I think that's something that I find really interesting is the journey from being a country young footy boy to an older footy boy now living in the city and so heavily involved in environmental sort of activism and conservation and stuff. I think it's like we need more young men to be role models taking on that journey. And I think it's also awesome, as you said, people are disconnected from nature, and especially most people probably live in the cities. I feel like you're talking about it in a way that is bringing it back to people in the city and connecting to people in the city a lot more. And we have to talk about the budgie smugglers and the native nature strips and stuff like that. Like something you've gotten a bit of attention for recently.
Yeah. So I'm just more than happy to advocate for, nature and the environment all different ways. I'm someone that, doesn't shy away from being able to speak, very honestly and openly at conferences and events. I don't have to answer for the government, or I don't have to answer to any bosses. Like that's what's also been awesome. The fact that I've been able to, staunchly advocate for whatever. And one of those recently was talking about nature strips. And like for people that might not know what I'm talking about with nature strips or verges, that's when you're driving along the roadside or, out the front of people's properties, when it's just a little strip of grass that, that people have to mow and maintain or pay the council to mow and maintain. And every time I see one of them, it's just absolute, like such a potential, like a blank canvas for planting native plants and creating habitat and biodiversity, particularly in our urban environments that lack a lot of that nature. And I was just thinking, like, what is even the point of some of these? Like, you see them, we're paying people to mow and maintain and put all this effort for it to look like this short little maintained grass that has no purpose. So that's why I protested. I put the budgie smugglers on. I was like, what are you going to do? Like, have people made these so that you can sit and sunbake on it? The news and media loved it, or hated it. They were like, how stupid is this? Someone's like laying on the middle of the road in their budgie smugglers. I'm like, it is stupid. Like, why is that grass there? Why is that not, native flowers and stuff? So I do, happy to be a bit, out there at times, and it's all in the name of the environment.
It's great. We need more of that, I think. And it does. It brings attention to the fact that it's stupid and it's a waste of space and a waste of money to mow it when it could be used so much better for, native plants, bringing in insects, maybe growing food. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
I've been really keen to mention this to you. Two of my neighbours across the road just got grants from the council to transform their nature strips into native gardens, and they're in the process of doing it now. And I was out there the other day helping them digging, and it was actually so nice because it's sort of something that's bringing our neighbours out into the street, and we're meeting each other and getting involved. And she sort of said, like, thanks so much for helping, but in my view, it's like, well, this is for all of us, doing your nature strip, we can do others. We can all transform this street into getting rid of these pointless nature strips that no one wants to mow into native gardens.
Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing about that is the actual history of lawn and of, like grass around your house goes back to times when, people would have their own crops so they could grow their own food. And some rich pricks were like, I don't even need to do that. I got that much money. I'll just buy food. I'll just have people make me my food. So I don't even need to grow my own crops. So they put grass out there as a flex to say, look at me, I'm growing this useless like crop that doesn't provide anything. It just looks nice. And that's like so the roots of grass and the history of it is to be a snobby prick. And so the fact that when you're planting the plants and it's bringing the community together makes a whole lot of sense. Like that is in a nutshell exactly why it's such an awesome way to bring people together, and it, you know, benefits biodiversity. It's cheaper to maintain, where we can plant plants that are more adapted to a drought. You know, they're native plants and more adapted to a native climate. So it's just such a massive win-win. And when you spoke before about as well, you know, having young male people that are present in the public and that are trying to get these positive like views and ways to get around nature and get around each other, it is very, very important, and especially in the times that we're seeing, like people mention the manosphere and totally. You know what's sort of coming across our feeds recently, and I do 100% agree with you. And I see it a lot growing up in a small country town, and I feel like that is why I'm very lucky to have had that environment, because I have that ability to be able to talk to that everyday Aussie in the pub, because that's part of me and my identity. And I feel like I also have like a bit of a responsibility to be able to continue doing that, because I can reach people where they are and be able to communicate with country town people from the pub that don't want to hear from a city slicker or, you know, someone in a suit.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really interesting. You know, we spoke about it last time. I asked you that question, talking about sort of role models, and did you have positive male role models in your life? And you came back and said that it was the women in your life, or that's what you felt that had brought you up to be the way you are, or that had led you, to your views and being, I don't know, nice, positive, respectful male, as we should be. And I thought that was really interesting, and that sort of changed my view on it. But then also, as you said, it's so important to go against what the whole idea of the manosphere, and you know, that whole sort of manosphere thing is probably a bit more of an extreme end, but clearly, like, young men are feeling lost and lacking purpose and looking for a community that tells them that they're worthy. And I think we need, as you said, we definitely need more people, more young guys like us, going against that grain a little bit and saying it's okay to care about nature and be empathetic and be respectful to women. I mean, it's really important that we are. And so I guess it's a good little call out for other young guys and other people out there to also do the same. And it's something also I wanted to talk about as well. Clearly, you're passionate about what you do and what you talk about. I could tell I hit a bit of a nerve with nature strips there. Because young men are lacking purpose and losing their place, or it seems like they're losing their place in the world a little bit. Can you talk about how doing the work that you do, advocating for nature, trying to make positive change, how it gives you that passion and helps you get out of bed in the morning?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, we are in a time where, you know, we're feeling disconnected from each other and disconnected from nature. And that is something that, you know, really can be super, super hard on you. And that's why it's so awesome to just get out, get amongst it. And, you know, like they say, touch grass or reconnect with nature. And one of the things that I've loved doing recently is going and on, you know, like group hikes or going on planting days, beach cleanups. Like there's these volunteer groups out there that are awesome to get around, to be able to, you know, meet new people, make friends, and then connect with nature and feel like you're doing something good for the planet. Because that's definitely something that puts a real like pep in my step, you know, like just cleaning up a bit of rubbish or putting a plant in the ground and just knowing that you've like made the world a better place, no matter how small the impact is. It is just something that is like super inspiring just for yourself.
Can you speak a bit more as well? You spoke just before about the work that you did with the Yolngu people up in Arnhem Land. Can you speak a bit about like what you learnt from doing that and the journey up there?
Yeah, so I was super, super lucky. Like to say it was once in a lifetime opportunity doesn't even like give it credit for just how amazing it was. You know, I was like living out on country and just involved in like this two-way knowledge exchange between the Yolngu First Nations and myself. And, you know, I had a little bit of stuff in what I knew about, you know, like DNA and native bees and the things I'd learned, and then was sharing that with the Yolngu First Nations and what they knew about the local flowers and plants and the local indigenous seasons and what to look for at certain times of year. And it was just super, super special to be a part of, and to be able to really, really connect with your local environment was just so special to me. And on a whole nother level as well. And one thing that really lit the fire in my belly was when we're up there, the reason we're up there was because the elders had noticed they're obviously very, very in touch with their local environment and the things that they see each year, like the time of year when the turtles are nesting, the time of year when birds, like migratory birds come back, when different things are flowering, when the winds or the rains and different things appear. And they had noticed that the time of year when they seen the fruit bats come out of the mangroves and they'd seen the parrots appear in the stringy barks was when they're meant to harvest the native bee honey. And when they were going to harvest native bee honey in like the last few years, like recently, they weren't finding as many hives, and when they were finding them, there wasn't much honey. And they've also noticed like flowers of different plants flowering erratically and at different times of year or later, and all of these things in their local ecosystems and climates that are just completely out of whack. And they're so in touch and like fine-tuned with all these sort of things that they know instantly that something's not right. And in such an area where there's no land clearing, there's no mining, there's nothing. Like it is just pristine, untouched, unmolested remnant habitat for thousands and thousands of years, which is still fully under care for country protocols and everything they do to look after it. And they're literally feeling the impacts of climate change. So that's one thing that really impacts me and gives me a whole nother sense of responsibility to want to educate more people about the environment and climate and want to get people motivated and involved to look after it, because we're seeing this is something that's happening all around the world. You know, people that are very good at looking after the environment, that have only ever done everything they can to care for country, and they're also at the same time the ones that are feeling the impacts of climate change, which they have not contributed to. So it's just the most unfair system, and was something that was really special to me to be involved in, but then at the same time really like shocking to see these impacts that you know, people that are just completely destroying and like profiting off ruining the climate and environment. And it's just something that really has really spurred me on to want to get people, you know, more involved and more angry about things, but then also more motivated to seek change.
Do you think, was that a bit of a watershed moment for you in your journey and giving you that passion to keep doing what you're doing? Or do you think did you find it somewhere else, or was it just sort of gradual the whole way through?
I think it's one of those things where it's just like, just things just sort of add up, and then all of a sudden, once you sort of take a step back and you just realize that there's just all these pieces to the puzzle. You know, it goes from like growing up watching these documentaries about nature and like connecting with nature, learning about it, and then also learning about how particular things are, you know, getting worse or are more worrying, like when there's more animals that are threatened and with extinction, or there's more changes to the climate, the weather's getting more extreme, and then you see these things add up, and then you start to see that there's, you know, particular people that are responsible for this, and particular companies and particular ways that they've you know, influenced the rules to benefit them. so that they can profit off this, and they can win from their own demise of the environment. And once you see all these different parts, how it's all part of this sort of system, and then that's really when it all sort of starts to click. You're right, and then you see the direct impacts of what it's having on people that have not contributed to it. It just is something that really motivates me to want to look after nature, and look after them, and do what I can, use particularly my privilege, like we've spoken about, like young men and being a man. Like I am it doesn't get more privilege than what I am. I'm a young, straight, white male with a very supportive family, perfect growing up environment. I have the privilege, and I should be using it to try and get things happening.
Yeah, I do like that idea. Use your privilege, and we need to, if we have it. I'm exactly the same. And that definitely lit a fire in my belly when I wanted to learn more about what was happening in the world in relation to climate change and all that sort of stuff. And it was this sort of light bulb moment when I learned that it's the change that we need to see isn't going to come through individual behavioral changes. And that was always something that I believed in, trying to use less plastic, eat less meat, drive the car less, all that sort of stuff. And I was really caught up in that and tried to do my best. And then I realized, for example, 70% of global emissions come from 100 corporations. And you're right, the injustice of the fact that the communities and places that will be hardest hit by the climate crisis are the ones that have contributed the least to it. Like Tuvalu, for example, that is facing an existential threat that they're going to lose their land, and they're currently, now moving to Australia, and we're one of the biggest historical emitters globally as well. That definitely lit a massive fire in my belly to go, we're not going to change these things by just living our lives a little bit differently. We have to get involved and speak up. And I think that's something that I wish more people knew and understood, because that was something that changed me and is what motivated me to start like standing up and getting involved in activism and all that sort of stuff. Going back a bit, why do you think it is, especially in the current world we're in and the way that decisions are made and things that happen, why do you think it's so important to start giving the decision-making power to First Nations people and communities as well, and that the people who have cared for this country and understand this country for tens of thousands of years? Why do you think we need to talk more about it as well?
Oh yeah, well there's a bit to unpack there, Mitch. Like what you spoke about at the start about how, and we've all been a part of this, like being super conscious of like what we can do ourselves, like, never using plastic straws, turning the lights off when we can, like putting on a jumper instead of turning the heater on, like, and thinking, like I'm making the world such a better place. And that every one of those actions does make such a difference when collectively we're consuming less and we're being more conscious and, eating less meat, all these sorts of things. And at the same time, you have one billionaire that takes a private jet to fly 30 minutes so that they don't have to get stuck in traffic. And you just think that there's just such things that are so messed up with this, or like, certain political decisions that are giving, subsidies, like a recent study around how just in Australia, we're spending $26 billion on subsidising fossil fuels and agriculture and forestry. So where our taxpayer dollars are going into funding things which are bad for the environment, harming nature, whilst our whole total part of the budget that's responsible for caring for nature is like barely $1 billion, 25 times less. So for every dollar we spend on protecting nature in Australia, we spend 25 on harming it. And you can see how
1 step forward, 25 steps backwards.
Yeah, you can see how it was never about plastic straws, but that's that's what we're thinking about. We're thinking about, how can I reduce my own thing? But when what we really need to be doing is educating ourselves on all of these things that we're in charge of. We're voting for these things. We're putting the people in power that can change these things. So it is on us to be educated about, some of the boring things that aren't sexy, like tax and like, political reform, these sorts of things that we do have an impact on more than not worrying about how long the lights are turned on. There's that part of it. And then there's the other part of it, like when we talk about having our own impact, we talk about consumerism, we talk about how there's 100 corporations that are responsible for 70% of all of our emissions. And that is something that's a recent thing in the modern world. That's something that we've done. We've managed to do all of this in 4 or 5 generations, which is crazy to me, because you think about how, like in Australia, we've got First Nations people that have been legends of caring for country for thousands of generations, that have been our first farmers and scientists, our first fire spreaders and regenerating country through fire, and have been doing this for thousands of generations. And then we've managed to rock up and screw everything up in just a matter of a few generations. It's just wild to me. So that in itself right there is a no-brainer why we should be incorporating, indigenous ways of thinking and indigenous science and indigenous just caring for country in our political decisions, in our everyday lives, in how we talk about the environment and the weather, how we talk about, agriculture, and so many of these things, that it's like going full circle, because that's the best way to look after country for so long. We've come here, we've stuffed it up, where our rivers are dirty and polluted, the soil health of our agricultural land is declining, and now we're having a light bulb moment to go, hey, I reckon it would be a good idea to get some indigenous ways of thinking back into the systems. Yeah, like no shit.
It seems wrong, doesn't it? It's like, First Nations people were caring for country, doing everything right for such a long time. We came in, bloody absolutely messed the place up, committed atrocities, and now we're like, we've messed up, we need you to fix it. Like, we need your help to fix it. It feels wrong. But yeah.
Oh, it's mental. And when you think about like some of these industries that have come here, and like there's a lot of hype around the gas industry at the moment, and trying to get the weasels to pay a bit of money for, coming to our country. And when I say our country, like obviously we're taxpayers, we're contributing to the subsidies that are given out and the contracts so that they can come here, set up. But they're also setting up on indigenous land, extracting resources from indigenous country, then, making profits of them, exporting them overseas, making absolute bank. Mm-hmm. And then none of that money, indigenous communities very rarely see any of that money. Mm-hmm. Australian taxpayers rarely see any of that money. It's just an absolute rort. And then we try and, bring in a little 25% tax. Oh, that'd be great. That doesn't impact anything. That's just taking a little chunk out of their profits. That is the very least we can do. It should be 100% tax. Like it's our resources, it's our everything.
Yeah.
And then you see the bloody these systems that kick into gear, and you see the advertisement, you see the gas lobby, you see it on they're sponsoring our footy clubs, they're putting ads on our TVs, they're putting billboards up, they're in the ears of our politicians, they're giving people with public facing profiles these talking points to reiterate the script that we see on our news that's being bought out by these same people. And it's ridiculous, and it's so unfair. We talk about Australia as being a land of the free and getting a fair go of things, and we're just not seeing it at all. And things need to change.
I couldn't agree anymore. 100,000% agree. I feel like sometimes I don't have the words to express how I'm feeling, because it makes you so angry, and just knowing the system and how it works and how much money they spend in campaigns to stop things like this gas tax and buying our politicians. Like, there was a video of, I could be wrong, but I think it was the National Senator Susan McDonald. She was on the Carl Stefanovic podcast with Punters Politics recently. And I think she said in a video, basically, like, clearly has been taking talking points from the gas industry, like completely bought out, and said, Australia isn't awesome. We're a great gas corporation, or we're a great gas company. And then she said, we're a great gas nation. I mean, like they can't hide it anymore. And the gas industry pays 43 cents of tax on every $100 of gas they export. Like, it is ridiculous. And I think it goes back, and this is obviously an issue which is interesting as well, that's on all sides of the political spectrum. I was watching one of the Karl Stefanovic episodes today with two right-wingers, and just to see what they're talking about. And they were all getting fired up about this gas tax stuff, which is so interesting, acknowledging that it's taxing resources is a left-wing issue, but they back it because it's like the right thing to do. And I think it goes back to talking about democracy and how decisions are made. We talk about the fact that we live in a democracy, we live in a really good democracy, but we don't really live in a democracy. Like, yes, we get to vote in our politicians and MPs at election time. If you get a Labor MP that you vote in, are they going to do anything, or are they just going to side with the government, or any government MP for that matter? Are they actually going to represent the interests of the people, or who donates to them? But I think talking about gas stuff is a great example of this. Like, if 60 to 70% of Australians want tax on gas exports, why isn't it happening? Also, there's a sort of a really good example of this happening locally, and I think I mentioned this to you last time. Coles want to build a supermarket down in Point Lonsdale on the edge of Swan Bay, which is a Ramsar listed wetland, critical habitat. Bob Brown was down there sort of advocating against it, which was pretty cool. Queenscliff, Point Lonsdale, the two towns around it. Everywhere you look, there are signs on people's fences that say no Coles at Swan Bay, no Coles at Swan Bay. Like, you can't go anywhere without seeing a sign. The whole community is against it, yet with the laws, it doesn't actually matter. Like, I feel like that's our problem. Democracy is so weak because communities don't actually get the final say in what happens in their communities. And talking about on country First Nations communities, like, they don't actually get a say. Like, there's all this talk of, consultation, we're listening to people, what the community wants, but it's, in my view, it's just a big load of crap because it's just a box ticking exercise. Like, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I've got a few actually. Yeah, like you said, it can be a consultation and a box ticking thing instead of a collaboration. We're not seeing things, intertwine into communities. And when you mention First Nations, what a recent example of this playing out, but in the flip side, is a Woolies has gone up into one of these Aboriginal communities in Northern Territory and Arnhem Land, so the town of Nullumboy or Gove. And this was like a mining town. So it was this little community, or, like a cluster of communities. And then they slowly get strangled because the little general stores and these little like servos, like every little community that can self-provide, their supply routes get restricted and strangled when a big corporation that just comes in and can ship in whatever and just, monopolize all of the different supply chains and everything, and set up so that then that becomes the center of the community. So there's no longer like, local butchers and bakers and fruit and veg shops. It's just the one-stop shop because they have all of their own nearby and their own shipping and everything to bring in. And then recently the mine in the town announced that it was closing down. And now Woolies has just said, oh, yep, nice, shut up shop, and they're leaving. And so now this small little community, which has, had decades and decades of their own like little independent supply chains and little community stores, that's been now monopolized by Woolies, and then they've just decided to up and leave, and now the community is going to be scrambling to try and reignite all of their partners, and it's also a really remote place to try and become self-sufficient again after they've just been shafted, because they were no longer seen as a viable, profitable location. So that's just
wow.
That's just ridiculous. And then going back to the point you made before about how we live in a democracy, but is it really a democracy? When you think about how, and the reason why some of these people with all of the resources and firepower for making change is we are a democracy, but if we had all of the same information in front of us, that would make it easier for everyday people to be like, that makes sense, like that should happen, or this makes sense, whatever. But that's not, we don't have access to all the same information, because what we see on the news, what we see on our ads, what we see that's constantly around us, even the public facing people, what they're told to say to us and talk about, our politicians that have lobbyists that are circling around them like vultures all the time. So we have, especially in Australia, that's a laid back nation, we don't have all of the same information around us, because it's what we see, in the ad breaks of the footy or what we see on the news. And so the average punter that just sits back and I don't want to research tax, I don't want to look into political issues, so I'm going to see what my mates are talking about, and what my mates are talking about is what they've just seen in their day-to-day. No one's doing a 10-minute Google search to actually research the policies that are going to directly be impacting us and impacting the environment. So we live in a democracy, but we are so heavily influenced by what we see around us, which is heavily influenced by the people that have billions and billions of dollars to pump into marketing and paying off politicians to make sure that the people that are making the rules are making them for them. So it is a very interesting thing, and why we should be less laid back as a nation and putting in a bit of time and effort into actually looking into policy and the things that are directly impacting it, so directly impacting us, so we can, bring it back to being a true democracy.
Yeah, totally. We need to make, it's going to sound so lame, but we need to make caring about politics cooler than it currently is. Oh, actually, I think a lot more people are starting to care, but maybe getting involved. But yeah, you're right. We live more in it's probably more closely resembles a plutocracy, which is a system governed by the rich and powerful, which essentially, that's what Pete said on our last chat. Like Donald Trump and people like him, they're just puppets for big corporations and billionaires. And whether it's Labor or Liberals or, God forbid, One Nation, they're all bought by billionaires and big corporations. It doesn't matter. The system is still the same. And that's what we've just seen with the whole gas stuff, is like the government and obviously all the other parties are so bought out by the gas industry that they're just spewing their talking points, and it completely, what's the word? Infiltrates our democracy to the point where it's so undemocratic. Was that a good word? Tick.
Yeah.
And I'm reading Grace Blakely. I don't know if you know Grace Blakely. I'm reading her book called Vulture Capitalism at the moment, and brings up a good point, what you're talking about. Capitalism basically incentivizes corporations like Woolworths their goal is to just make as much money as they can and to make as much profit as they can. It doesn't matter what they do. They're not thinking about communities. They're not thinking about the impact that it has on small local businesses. Their aim is they have the power and the money and the resources to buy up more assets that make small businesses go out of business. And that is clearly such a massive problem.
Yeah, what you're saying as well, like I don't blame the everyday punter. I have no quarrel with the everyday laid back Aussie, because
absolutely,
especially recently, we don't have the time to be researching. Like, we need to be, but we don't have the time to be researching into politics and taxes and different things, because most people in this day and age are worried about, where the money for their rent is going to come from, or they're not being able to afford to put on heating or the aircon on a bloody incredible heat wave that's unprecedented in human history. Mm-hmm. Where some of us are worried about surviving. So it's like, how can people have the time to be worried about, doing all this extra stuff when their first priority is just to survive, just to be able to make enough money to pay the bills? And one thing that just a random comment I got on Instagram, actually, that I've been sort of ticking over my brain recently, someone actually said that poor people pay taxes, rich people pay accountants, millionaires pay for lawyers, and billionaires pay for politicians.
I saw that. I think I saved that as well. I love that. I don't love it. I hate it, but it's so true.
Well, yeah, but you can just see how some of these systems just need to be flipped on their heads, and because we do, in a democracy, we have the majority. If we can educate ourselves and know what directly impacts us, and the decisions we can make to positively impact ourselves and our own future, like the ball is in our court. Mm-hmm. We can literally pave the way for our own future by the decisions we make, the people we support, the way we vote, and these things. And so there's never been a more important time to, educate yourself and come together and throw out all this undoing of our futures that's been done by recent generations that have been building generational wealth and impacting the decisions so that the people that are running the show will continue to run the show.
Yeah, if anyone's watching the video of this, I probably look like an absolute idiot because I'm just nodding my head in agreement to everything that you've just said. And I feel like I've got a few things to say. The first thing was, my conspiracy theory is that the system by design is to keep people working as much as they can so they have little time to spend understanding how the system works and being able to do anything about it. The second thing I want to say was I came into this caring about nature and climate change, and now finding myself getting involved in like running an election, talking about fascism, understanding capitalism, all that sort of stuff, because I've learned about how the climate and environmental crises aren't going to change without changing the systems that govern us and the systems that are causing these crises. And yes, you're so right. Like, we have the power, and I think now is an opportunity as things are falling apart around the world. The systems are crumbling. People feel so disappointed and discontent with politics and how the system's working. A lot of people are obviously shutting off and feeling disillusioned and not thinking about it at all. But there are a lot of people who are paying more attention and see how corrupt everything is because of the corporate influence on our politics and how that is, I guess it's such a corrupting influence. It's an opportunity for people to actually stand up and create something different, because we do have the power. And I was writing something down about this before. We have the power. We just need to believe in it. And I think the greatest threat to the status quo and the system is a movement of people who are inspired and believe that they can make a change. And I think that's one of my personal goals, is to inspire people to believe that they can actually make a difference. You and I are obviously on the journey that we're on because we believe we can. And I hope that more people will feel encouraged and inspired to do the same and get out there, because, you're right.
Oh, I'm the same. Not in my head at everything you say, Mitch, and I'm in such agreement. And it's like those things where when we say that we're in control of our own future, it's and trying to make politics or make taxes more sexy or more engaging. Like, there's people listening, right? And I know this for a fact from my mates that they go to the dentist like once every 2 years or whatever, or some of them are still getting their parents to pay for their dentist. How good would that be if it was free? Mm-hmm. If we had a tax on gas exports, 25%, we could go to the dentist for free. So there's literally things that we can control in the way we vote and, make aware to our politicians that are interesting to the public and what, we are wanting, that would directly impact us. Like, free visit to the dentist, that would be great. Mm-hmm. Or also, how many people go to uni or go to TAFE, especially our age? Imagine if that was for free. Like, how awesome would that be to not have I'm not sure what your HECS debt is. Like, mine was up to 40 grand.
I don't have a HECS debt.
Lucky you. Yeah. So, but some of my mates are over $60,000 in HECS debts, but it could be zero, right? Like, say, for example, we scrapped the capital gains discount tax. And for people that aren't sure what that is, the capital gains tax discount, that's when, instead of someone making $100,000 through their wages, like they have a boss, they have a job and earn 100,000. Instead of that, someone can have $100,000 in shares, or like, you know, make $100,000 a year from shares instead of wages. And you don't have to pay income tax on half of that money. So your tax rate is instantly less because there's this big discount. And if we scrap that, because that's only benefiting the top 1% that own all the houses and have all equity and shares and bonds and trusts and everything. If we scrapped that, we would have free university and TAFE for everyone. Mm-hmm. So we have these certain policies around, you know, our tax and our economic system that are benefiting those same people that had the billions of dollars to influence political decisions so that they could get these discounts, could get these tax loopholes and all these different things to benefit them, while we all are trying to scrape all our money together to go to uni to get a better life for ourselves. But no, we could just be voting for these things to directly impact our own well-being, you know? It's
Totally.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and that's how the system's geared, isn't it? It's geared towards helping the already wealthy generate even more wealth, like $30,000 a minute in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. Like, we talk about the fossil fuel industry being, you know, like the backbone of the economy, whatever. Like, if it was, why do they need, you know, however many, I think it's like $17 billion a year just to fossil fuels in subsidies. Like, why do they need that money if they make, like, their profits are enormous? Like, that is ridiculous. And also, that's it. Capital gains tax discount. It looks like after, you know, a lot of pressure for a long time, especially from the Greens and Greens MP Max Chandler Mather, who was sadly lost his seat at the seat in Parliament last election, something he was pushing really difficult on and getting under the government's nose about. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Looks like maybe they'll do some changes at the upcoming budget. Don't know exactly what they'll look like, but hopefully there will be some changes because, yeah, that's it. These tax breaks allow property investors who own 10 properties gives them an incentive to buy more, and it makes it harder for us to buy our first home. Do you own a house?
No, not a chance.
Yeah,
I just took my car back to the mechanic. I just took my car to the mechanic, and when I got my invoice, I was too scared to look at it.
Yeah, fair enough. I know. That's like, I feel like young people are just giving up because house prices are ridiculous, and the system is so geared against, like, for example, young people being able to buy a house, and that's how I felt for a long time. I don't own a house. It's funny that we began talking about nature, and now we're talking about housing and all of that sort of stuff. And I think it shows that probably for a lot of people step into this space caring deeply about a certain issue. And then once you step in, you just start falling and getting involved in understanding all of the other issues and how they're all connected. Yeah, I find it interesting.
Because it all starts like when I love nature, and I was making silly videos on the internet, you know, my budgie smugglers, and talking about how awesome bees are and stuff, and people loved it. But at the end of the day, like, that's great to educate people and get people to care and get people aware. But at the end of the day, in terms of impact, getting those decisions made in the important places, in the higher up places, is where we can have some of the biggest changes. So that's why it all, you know, you go down that pipeline and you end up in that way at some stage.
Yeah, that exactly right. That's how I felt as well. Like, I used to, care about a lot of these issues, but looking back, all I was doing was, as I said, like maybe picking up plastic on the beach and sharing something on my Instagram story every now and then, just a little bit. And then you go deeper and deeper and understand what actually needs to happen. Do you want to speak a bit about the sort of work that you're doing at the moment? Like, anything in particular that you are doing, like stepping more into that advocacy or like political lobbying sort of space that you can speak about?
Yeah, well, I think it always starts with education. I think education is such an important thing. There's definitely people that are out there, you know, talking about nature, advocating for nature. There's awesome climate groups, environment groups that I really just enjoy filling my feed with things about nature, and that are, you know, particularly positive facing things. I find that hope and optimism is such an important thing to have, probably more than ever. than right now. So I do love having these things in my feed to continue to learn more about nature myself, and see cool things that are happening around Australia and around the world. And I love that personally myself, and that's also why I love to get out into nature and find cool insects and make videos and share knowledge and learn myself. That's been something that I've loved recently. And then more recently with wanting to have impact in the spaces to the decision makers and the powerful people that are in charge of nature's future. I've wanted to start making friends with those different org CEOs and those lawyers and MPs and politicians and that sort of thing. And recently was lucky enough to really connect with David Pocock, because everyone would have seen him around the gas tax and how we're paying more in beer excise and all these sorts of things. And he's just a super awesome bloke. Like, he was originally a rugby league player he was originally a rugby union player for Australia, and then just has turned into an ultimate just Aussie legend. And he's also, as well as being just a genuine great Aussie person, is a nature nerd. He loves birds and he loves nature, and so we really connected around that. And we're sort of agreed that we need more environmentally friendly and caring people in the big house, and advocating for that. So he was happy to sponsor me a pass so I can walk the halls of Parliament House in Canberra, and I can get in the ears of the people that are making our decisions, and at the very least cancel out one of the 2,000 fossil fuel lobbyists or whatever that also have these passes. So it's definitely one avenue where I'm really wanting to get more involved. And like we said earlier, I'm a young white male. There's no more privilege than what I have, and I'm very aware of this, and at the same time grateful for it, because a lot of everywhere I've gotten to in my life, I've benefited from the privilege I have. And so why not continue to use my privilege to benefit, the people that don't get a seat at the table and that don't get their voices heard. And that's why I also have a sense of responsibility to speak for young people, to speak for marginalised communities, to speak for First Nations people, to let them have a say through my own platform and own vessels that I get the privilege and have the privilege to share. So that's one thing recently where I've really been trying to get involved myself.
Awesome. That's so good that you've... It's amazing what I think, like, the power of social media as well. Obviously, as we were talking about, it's a really good tool for change. It's good for education, getting people to understand these issues. It's not necessarily going to influence political decisions, but it's cool that it's given you that platform to be able to, I guess, have more power to talk about these things, because that's a very powerful position that a normal bloke can be in, to actually have the opportunity to go and meet with politicians. And it is so cooked that there's however many fossil fuel lobbyists walking the halls of Parliament at any one time, and the representatives from Shell and Woodside and Santos and other big fossil fuel companies don't talk about who gives them their passes.
I put a number on it before, and we actually have no idea, because it's not public information. It's very secret squirrels who actually has these orange passes.
And I think it's really good to see Pocock, the work that he's done in getting trying to expose this a bit more, like putting up the register about who is giving who their passes. But that just goes to show, if an MP is giving access to these big corporations that are working in the interests of themselves and not people, then these politicians are not working in the interests of people.
Well, yeah, exactly. That it goes to show the fact that just an everyday Aussie off the street like me can get a pass and access wherever the hell I want to in Parliament House. Does that not show exactly how the system itself is very, very interestingly constructed? Absolutely
cooked. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I guess talking about, so for people who are listening, they're maybe feeling a bit disillusioned by the state of the world, or they're feeling a bit fired up, they do want to make a change, they've been inspired by the work that you've done. If there's people out there who want to do something, like what can people do? What are some of the many things that people can do to get involved and support like the stuff that you're doing or in other areas? Like what would you say to that?
Well, I think I might actually surprise you with what I'm about to say, because this is something that I heard recently, and what everyone that's listening that feels like they should get involved and be doing something, the first thing that everyone should be doing is to simply take a step back and slow down and make sure that you yourself are okay, and that you yourself are taking things one step at a time and connecting with nature when you can, and connecting with loved ones. Because above all else, family comes first, caring for yourself comes first, caring for the environment. These should all come first. So the first thing people should be doing is just take a step back and to be caring for yourself. I think that's super important, because one of the things people get so like, I want to get involved, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it can be not sustainable at times if people are burning out, because you can only take on so much, criticism, or you can only see so much bad that's going on in the world to get disheartened and disillusioned. So I reckon looking after yourself is one of the very important things that should be a top priority. And once you're achieved that, once you're happy and healthy, which above all else is what should be your first priority, then there's definitely ways to get involved. I find being educated is one of the best things you can do, so that you're more politically aware and literate. You're more monetarily and financially, economically literate. You know about taxes. You know about political systems, and even I've probably just lost people already just around that. But there is people out there, and there is resources out there, there is organizations out there that make it so easy and so simple for any random Aussie off the street to open a website, to click on a link and be instantly know everything they need to know. Like Think Forward's got this stuff about tax called Tax Match at the moment, which is an absolute killer. They've even made it into like this sort of gimmicky dating website, like as a mock-up obviously, and whether you want to like date or dump potential taxes that we're voting for and will affect us. So things like that. Or shout out to Punters Politics, the work that man has been doing in the last few years to get the everyday Aussie battler or punter to become aware of political things and decisions that are impacting all of us has been incredible. I was talking to someone at the pub last night, like a young netballer from our footy club, who was connecting with me about Punters Politics. I'm thinking, I'm in a country town pub with a local young girl, and we're talking about politics. Like, this is nuts. The impact that some of these people are having. So education is definitely one. And then there's more of the things like on the ground, like getting involved in community groups, going to volunteering, finding beach cleanups. There's these groups that are out there for us to get involved in, where we can be, planting plants, we can be doing things for the environment, and, connecting with other like-minded people. And like one of the ones I love going to, I've been doing a lot of recently, is Coexist. They're a group of young volunteering initiatives that are set up right around Australia. So shout out to Coexist. And so practical ways is another way where you're doing something. You feel like you're doing something for nature and for the environment, which I love. And then there's also just things you can do like by yourself, like, in the backyard. You can plant native plants, which is one thing I always love getting people to do, talk about the nature strips, but, putting in native flowers for your local ecosystems and your local habitat, your pollinators, all that sort of stuff. And like you said before, I was really excited when you said you had a few of your neighbours that got the grants to plant the nature strips, because when they've done studies on urban biodiversity, in our towns, in our cities, the things that they've found to be the most supportive and facilitative of biodiversity have actually been, one was, the diversity of the species they're planting. So if you have a little patch with, 10 species, that's going to be better than having a patch with a couple. So a bit like that, but that actually trumps the size of the patch. So if you have a little patch with a diversity, that's going to be better for insects and pollinators and urban biodiversity than if you have a big park that only has a few different species of trees and grass, So that was one of the main things. But the other awesome thing is the connectivity is something that really impacts urban biodiversity. So if you have a few people on your street, they're almost like little stepping stones of, a longer corridor or like a pollinator pathway or, a little mini ecosystem that gets connected so if you convince a few of your neighbors to also plant some plants, or, if you have a few people within the same community that like band together, you're creating the connectivity, which will benefit the whole surrounds. So yeah, a little quick summary right from, taking a moment and a step back to look after yourself and, connect with the people around you, your friends, your family, and your local environment. Then also becoming educated, learning about the environment, learning about the climate, learning about the political systems that we have a say in that impact us and impact nature. And then also the on the ground practical things that you can get involved in is my answer to your question. Go back, sorry. I just get a bit excited at times. Yeah, go on.
Good. That's good. We need excitement and passion. Otherwise, and it should be. It's awesome. It's so exciting. And I think like personally, I think I spend more time in the sort of realm of politics and how decisions are made and trying to influence that space. But I think there's so much power in the physical on the ground work, like tree planting and beach cleanups, more to obviously like those things are so good to do and so needed, especially revegetating nature, getting more biodiversity into our towns and stuff. But for developing that community and meeting people, and you see people who feel the same and also want to see a better world. You're not just like watching bad things happen on your phone, but you're like, wow, there's actually people out there who care. And I think they're good stepping stones to getting more involved and finding more pathways to what you can actually do.
Absolutely. And, we're in a time where we do feel like, we're disconnected from each other. We're disconnected from nature. We're spending like, my screen time. I wouldn't want to public disclose that number because it's embarrassing how much time I spend staring at this little box in my hand, But when like you're saying, when you go to these spaces where there is community, and you just think, there's other people out here that care as much as I do, that have given up their time to come out and make a change. And when you see that that's happening, that is something that's really inspiring for yourself as well, to know that there's other people out there that also want the best for, nature and for each other. It's great.
Absolutely. And I think I kind of mentioned this, but yeah, for anyone listening or watching, like if you're not sure what you should do or need to do, and you're not sure what your skills are or where to go, just try and do anything. I think this is what I was doing anyway. This is sort of my personal story. I was trying to do anything. I didn't know what to do. I was just like trying to get involved how I could. And then I got involved there's a local info night about offshore seismic blasting and gas exploration that was planned out off the coast. I went there, met Lisa, who started a group called Ocean, which I got involved with, like offered my skills, and then eventually sort of found a way to get involved and offer my help and the skills that I had. And then it just led into so many different things. And I think you're probably the same. You just take that first step, try and get involved and do something, and it opens up so many more pathways and opportunities which may not be present to you if you hadn't sort of started or done anything yet. Last thing I'd love to ask, and I want to make a bit of a theme. Any good books that you're reading at the moment or you've read lately that you could recommend? Are you a reader?
I'm like a obsessive reader. So as in like I'll like start a book and then I have to finish it in 2 days and then I won't read another one for like a month. I think I'd like to recommend just my favorite all-time book that I've read last year or the year before was Fire Country by Victor Stephenson. And it was around like indigenous care for country and management practices. And I just thought it just changed the whole way I see nature and see myself as a part of it and part of this bigger system. And when I had read about, it was this awesome moment of like, you read about things that are involved in nature. And one thing, like the reason why I love the indigenous season so much, I was reading about these things in the book around, when you see like animals that are roadkill, like kangaroos, and that's because the bush is so thick and, neglected that they choose to run along the sides of roads because it's easier to go from A to B, and things around like when places are choked up and they're like thick fuel loads under feet versus, and then when I was reading about these things and then up in Arnhem and I was asking like some of the local mob up there about things, and they'd be like, oh, because I'm, walking through places and be like, oh, this is hard to get through. And they'd be like, oh yeah, that's because we haven't burned for a while here because this is like a sacred area. Like it's sorry business. We're like leaving it alone. And when I was like reading about these things, it was making me think about these things, and I was seeing it and it was clicking, and I was like, this is just so awesome. And I've gotten heaps of people to read it ever since because I just love it. But I'm definitely someone that needs to read more. I feel like a few people would say that because, like you said, you're a bit of a reader yourself, and it is an awesome way to disconnect from the online world.
Fire Country, I'll have to read it. It sounds like a good read. Lastly, something I'm keen to hear about is your documentary, 7 Seasons. Like, if you want to briefly just talk about what it's about, what the premise of the doco is, and where people can see it.
Yeah, so and you mentioned like my documentary, but I like to think of it as obviously like being a part of the documentary because there was so much collaboration between the different people that spoke and provided their knowledge on it. And people have probably recognized me. If anyone's recognized me from anything, it's when I've made videos about the indigenous seasons, because I'll say something a bit silly about how like autumn doesn't exist in Australia, or
that was the first time I saw one of your videos, the autumn thing. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, So I find indigenous seasons so awesome because instead of it being like, all right, it's March the 1st, it's autumn now. It's like, no, it's when we get the rain at the end of summer and when the wombats start appearing. And when you go in different places in Australia, there's different birds, there's different animals, there's different trees, different climates. And it's such an awesome way to connect with your local environment when you're looking for, the first time of year that you see the moths appear out of the ground after rain, or when you see birds come to nest, different things like that. And I found that so interesting. So I tried to make a sort of like this documentary and get different First Nations perspectives from around Melbourne, around how Melbourne is this place where people say 4 seasons in a day, or they say Melbourne weather, like they go, oh, the first day of summer, people are like, it's so cold, it's meant to be summer. And I go, yeah, summer doesn't make sense, does it? But you know what does? Like Garrawang or Bitterap, the indigenous seasons, because they know exactly what should be happening this time of year, which, the cool start to summer makes sense because it's actually when we have the turbulent weather as we transition into the warmer periods, and we're getting all this wind come off from the coast. And I found it so interesting and put this together to get people to connect with indigenous knowledge and seasons, and also around climate change and the fact that we're going to be experiencing different weather and different climate in Melbourne. Even in the city, you don't have to be on a sinking island in the Pacific. You don't have to be from a bushfire prone area to feel the impacts of the climate. We're going to see that in Melbourne as well. And so I just found it so awesome and love to put it together. So if anyone is listening to this and wants to come, I'm going to have a few screenings of the doco in our Reconciliation Week around Melbourne that people can come along to. And then I'll probably try and get it on a streaming service, or like one of those ethical documentary sites for people to watch, because I'd love to just get as many eyes and ears on indigenous knowledge and seasons as I can, because I just ooze passion and enthusiasm for it myself, and just love to share it and give it a platform.
Yeah, I'm keen. I still haven't watched it actually, so I'm really keen to. I'll try and get up to a screening at some point soon.
Yeah, perfect.
It's so good. Is there anything else that you wanted to speak about before we wrap it up? It's been a great chat.
Yeah, it's been unreal. I'd love to give you credit as well. I think you're pumping up my tires somewhere in our chat we've just had. But what you're doing is awesome, and you're a fantastic male role model yourself. So I'd love to give you a bit of a shout out too, and thanks for having me on, and thanks for also being some of my motivation for staying accountable and doing the right things and getting the word and all the right messages out there. So I appreciate you as well.
Oh, thanks, Clancy. That's really nice. I appreciate that. Well, thanks so much for having a conversation with me again. And thanks to everyone for listening, if you were listening.
Yeah, and get on Bees and Blossoms. If you've made it this far, give us a follow.
Yeah, sorry, I should have plugged it earlier. You'll see some great content, including Clancy in budgie smugglers hanging out on nature strips. And it got a bit of media, didn't it? It was I saw it on news.com.au.
Yeah, even on Murdoch Media, still ate it up.
How good's that? That's so good. Thanks for listening, folks. If you enjoyed this chat, it would be great if you could leave a review on whichever podcast app you're listening from. And you can stay up to date with Clancy on Instagram at beesandblossoms.oz. And you can follow me at Mitch C. Pope. Thanks again for listening and catch you soon.